On the night of July 12, 2003, the city of Recife, Pernambuco, was particularly hot and humid. A light rain intermittently fell over the historic mansions of the Snow Jose neighborhood, where family and friends gathered to celebrate the engagement of Marcelo Augusto Fernandes, 29, and Juliana Cavalcanti Meireles, 26. The couple had met 3 years earlier during a specialization in business administration at the Federal University of Pernambuco and decided to formalize their commitment. On that Saturday night, the party took place at the Mansão Colonial Restaurant, a 19th century mansion restored and belonging to Juliana's family for 2 generations. Located just 800 meters from the city center, the establishment was known for its sophisticated events and historic wine cellar built during the colonial period. The guests, about 70 people, later reported that the celebration went smoothly until around 11:40 p.m. Juliana, with a degree in business administration and working at Banco do Brasil, was an only child of Eduardo Meireles, a hotel industry businessman, and Marcia Cavalcanti, a university professor, described by friends as methodical and organized. She had planned every detail of the party. She wore a navy blue dress with a straight cut and the pearl necklace her parents had given her as a gift that morning. Marcelo, a civil engineer and partner in a medium-sized construction company, was the youngest of 3 siblings. Originally from Garanhuns in the interior of Pernambuco, he had moved to Recife at 18 to attend university. According to colleagues, he was communicative and entrepreneurial, having quickly achieved financial stability after graduation. On that night, he wore a gray suit and the Omega watch he had bought for the occasion. At 11:45 p.m., as recorded by the restaurant's security cameras, the couple went up to the 2nd floor of the mansion, where the administrative office and access to the historic wine cellar were located. According to the testimony of Carla Meireles, Juliana's cousin and the last person to see them, the couple said they were going to fetch a special bottle of wine for the final toast. They were happy, smiling. Juliana said she wanted to show Marcelo a rare bottle her grandfather had kept for a special occasion. Carla told the police dot at 12:20 a.m. Eduardo Meireles, Juliana's father, noticed the couple's prolonged absence and asked an employee to search for them. After initial unsuccessful searches, the family began to worry. Calls to the couple's cell phones went directly to voicemail. At 1:15 a.m., after checking all the rooms in the restaurant without finding them, Eduardo reported their disappearance to the police. The initial search focused on the mansion and its surroundings. Security cameras showed the couple ascending to the 2nd floor, but there was no record of their exit. However, the security system had a flaw. There was a 17-minute gap in the recordings between 11:52 p.m. and 12:09 a.m. due to a power outage that affected part of the neighborhood that night. This was the first of many obstacles in the investigation. The wine cellar, which was superficially checked that night, showed no signs of disturbance. A side door that led to a secondary street was locked from the inside, and all the windows on the 2nd floor were closed. The mystery of the couple's disappearance began to unfold, leaving both family members and authorities perplexed. Over the next 48 hours, the civil police mobilized teams to search hospitals, police stations, and the main roads leading out of the city. The couple's cell phones remained off, and their credit cards showed no activity after the disappearance. Marcelo and Juliana's cars were found parked near the restaurant, exactly where they had left them for the party. On the 3rd day, the federal police joined the investigation due to the possibility of kidnapping or human trafficking. The case quickly gained national attention, with headlines splashed across newspapers throughout the country. Couple mysteriously disappears during engagement party in Recife. The official investigation, led by Detective Roberto Almeida from the Homicide and Protection of Persons Department, DHPP, initially focused on three main hypotheses: voluntary escape, kidnapping, or homicide. However, the lack of a ransom demand and the couple's profile, with no known financial issues or enemies, made the latter two theories less likely. During the first week after their disappearance, over 30 people were interviewed, including family members, friends, restaurant staff, and neighbors. One detail caught the investigators' attention. According to 3 employees, there were rumors of a secret passage in the mansion, built in the 19th century to provide an escape during Dutch invasions. However, no original plans of the building were found. To confirm this information, on July 22, 2003, 10 days after the disappearance, the first concrete clue emerged. A security camera at a gas station in Jabawa 2 dos Gararapes, a metropolitan area of Recife, recorded a couple resembling Marcelo and Juliana boarding an intercity bus bound for Salvador. The low-quality footage didn't allow for definitive identification, but revived hopes of finding them. Teams were sent to Salvador to check hotels, inns, and real estate agencies for any records of the couple. Meanwhile, investigators examined the couple's bank accounts and financial history, discovering that Marcelo had withdrawn 15,000 reais 3 days before the engagement party, an amount his brother said was meant for purchasing wedding rings and paying party vendors. The first month of investigation ended without significant progress. The Salvador lead proved unfruitful when the couple in the footage was identified as tourists from Rio Grande do Sul with no connection to the case. A family, dissatisfied with the slow pace of the investigation, hired a private detective, Rogério Campos, a former police officer with 25 years of experience. Campos brought a fresh perspective to the case by focusing on the mansion's history. After research in historical archives and interviews with local historians, he discovered that the building had been a point of resistance during the Pernambuco Revolution of 1817, and that documents from that period mentioned hidden compartments used to conceal weapons and documents. In September 2003, a thorough search using ground-penetrating radar radar was conducted at the mansion, a technology rarely used in Brazilian investigations at the time. The equipment detected anomalies in the structure of the south wall of the wine cellar, suggesting the existence of an empty space behind it. However, the property owner, Eduardo Morales, Juliana's father, initially resisted the idea of breaking down the historic wall, claiming that the equipment might have only detected original ventilation ducts. After a court order on October 3, 2003, the wall was partially opened, revealing a narrow corridor that extended approximately 7 meters before ending at another stone wall. This corridor, however, was empty and showed no signs of recent use. The discovery, while interesting from a historical perspective, did not bring any progress to the case. Meanwhile, a parallel line of investigation emerged when former colleagues of Marcelo revealed that he had mentioned months before his disappearance plans to open a business abroad. Federal police records confirmed that Marcelo had requested a new passport 4 months before the engagement, but there was no record of it being used at any border. By early 2004, the investigation began to cool off. Juliana's family offered a reward of St. Horace OO for information leading to the whereabouts of the couple, while the media gradually reduced coverage of the case. Reports of sightings in different parts of the country emerged, all of which were investigated and later ruled out. In May 2004. A temporary twist occurred when an employee from a guest house in Fernando de Noronha claimed to have hosted the couple. In March of that year, according to him, they used false names, but their physical characteristics matched. However, upon verifying the guest house's records and security footage, investigators concluded that it was a different couple with only a superficial resemblance. By the time the case reached its 1-year mark in July 2004, it was formally reclassified. as open with no active leads, though it was not officially closed. Juliana's family continued conducting independent searches, while Marcelu's brothers gradually accepted the possibility that they might never learn what happened that night. Over the next 5 years, the case occasionally resurfaced in the media, especially on the anniversary of the disappearance. In 2009, a television special about unsolved cases reignited public interest, generating new tips, all of which were once again found to be unfounded after investigation. In April 2012, nearly 9 years after the disappearance, an unexpected discovery brought the case back into the spotlight. The mansion that housed the Mansau Colonial Restaurant was sold by Eduardo Meirelles to a business group planning to turn it into a boutique hotel. During the renovation process, workers found a small camouflage door behind a built-in bookshelf on the second-floor office, which led to a narrow, steep staircase. Roberto Santos, the engineer responsible for the renovation, reported to the police. Initially, we thought it was just another one of the mansion's secret compartments. When we removed the bookshelf to expand the space, we realized there was a door painted the same color as the wall, with disguised hinges and no visible doorknob. The passage, undetected during the initial searches due to its perfect camouflage and the heavy bookshelf blocking it, led to an intermediate level between the second floor and the basement, where the main wine cellar was located. This space, approximately 20 square meters, had originally been a small secondary wine cellar, as revealed by old plans of the building, which were finally located in the archives of the Pernambuco Historical Heritage Foundation. Upon being notified of the discovery, Detective Roberto Almeida, who was still overseeing the case despite his transfer to another division, immediately requested that the area be cordoned off and treated as a potential crime scene. The entrance to the small cellar was blocked by a solid wooden door locked with an old rusted padlock. After forced entry, forensic experts found the area preserved like a time capsule. Dust-covered wine bottles lined wooden shelves, and the air was thick and stale, indicating a lack of proper ventilation for years. What stood out most, however, was the absence of an alternative exit. The only way to enter or leave the space was through the recently discovered door. In the farthest corner of the entrance, partially hidden by empty barrels, the experts found remains of fabric degraded by time. Upon moving the barrels, they came across 2 human skeletons, lying side by side in an advanced state of decomposition. Near the remains, they found a partially oxidized men's watch and fragments of a pearl necklace. The remains were carefully collected and sent to the Legal Medical Institute for forensic analysis. Preliminary tests indicated that the remains belonged to a young man and a woman, both adults and dead for several years. The position of the bodies, side by side with their arms seemingly intertwined, suggested that there was no struggle or resistance at the time of death. On May 5, 2012, DNA tests confirmed what the families had feared. The remains were identified as those of Marcelo Augusto Fernandes and Juliana Cavalcante Meirelles. The identification was possible thanks to a comparison with the genetic material from Juliana's parents and Marcelo's siblings. Forensic examinations, led by Dr. Antonio Pessoa's team, revealed disturbing details about the circumstances of the deaths. The door to the secondary wine cellar had been locked from the outside, and the internal mechanism that would allow it to be opened without a key was broken. There were no signs of violence on the skeletal remains, and the toxicological analysis of Juliana's preserved hair showed no presence of toxic substances. It appears that the couple entered the wine cellar voluntarily, possibly to fetch the special bottle mentioned by witnesses, and ended up trapped when the door closed behind them, explained Dr. Pessoa. The door was heavy and closed automatically with a counterweight system. With the internal mechanism broken and no one able to hear their calls due to the thickness of the walls and the loud music from the party, they couldn't get out. The discovery deeply affected the families and the community. Eduardo Mireles, Juliana's father, suffered a heart attack 2 days after the confirmation and had to be hospitalized. In a subsequent interview, visibly shaken, he stated, "For years, I imagined 1,000 scenarios, but I never thought my daughter had been so close to us all this time, trapped in that terrible place," Eduardo Mireles, Juliana's father, said after the confession. Leave in the comments that you should never give up on the truth if you believe that all the missing deserve to be found. The conclusion of the case raised more questions than answers. How could such a significant space in the mansion, an entire secondary wine cellar, have gone unnoticed during the initial searches? Why were the original plans of the property, which indicated the existence of this room, only found years later? And how did no one notice the smell of decomposition in the months following the disappearance? These questions led to a complete reinvestigation of the case, now considered a homicide by negligence. Subsequent discoveries revealed serious flaws in the initial investigative process and raised disturbing suspicions of possible deliberate obstruction. A meticulous analysis of the security camera footage recovered from the police files showed that during the 17-minute power outage, an unidentified figure entered the corridor leading to the office. This person was never mentioned in the official reports from the first investigation. In a testimony given in June 2012, Carlos Vasconcelos, the former manager of the restaurant, who had been fired 3 months before the engagement, revealed crucial information. Mr. Eduardo Mireles was very familiar with that secondary wine cellar. He was the one who showed me the door mechanism when I took over the management in 2001. He kept the most valuable wines there, away from the staff. This statement directly contradicted Eduardo's original testimony, where he claimed not to know about the space. When confronted with this inconsistency, Eduardo, still recovering from his heart attack, admitted that he knew about the secret cellar but claimed he had simply forgotten about it during the emotional turmoil following his daughter's disappearance. The technical examination of the door and lock revealed another disturbing discovery. The internal mechanism that would have allowed the door to be opened from the inside had not simply broken over time. It showed signs of intentional damage, as if it had been sabotaged. The external padlock appeared to have been placed after the couple's disappearance, as it did not show the same level of oxidation that would be expected after 9 years. In July 2012, Detective Almeida formally requested the exhumation and reanalysis of the remains, using more advanced forensic technologies that were not available during the initial analysis. New tests detected microfractures in Marcelu's skull bones, consistent with a blunt force trauma. These subtle injuries, unnoticed in the first analysis, suggested that he may have been struck before his death. In August 2022, nearly 10 years after the bodies were discovered and 19 years after the disappearance, the case reached its final chapter. Eduardo Mireles, now 71 years old and in poor health, called a press conference to make a public confession. In a live broadcast, Eduardo admitted that days before the engagement, he had discovered that Marcelu was having an affair with an ex-girlfriend and was planning to financially defraud the Mireles family after the marriage. I confronted him discreetly during the party. I called him to talk in the private wine cellar, where Juliana found us during the discussion. There was an altercation, and in the heat of the moment, I hit Marcelu with an object. He fell, and Juliana went into despair. When I tried to calm her, she had a nervous breakdown. I went out to get help, but when I returned, I found my daughter unconscious next to him. I panicked and in a moment of insanity, locked the door. The confession, full of inconsistencies when compared to the forensic evidence, was met with skepticism by the investigators. The main contradiction was that Juliana showed no signs of death from a nervous breakdown, but rather from dehydration and starvation, after days of being trapped in the wine cellar. Additionally, messages recovered from Marcelu's cell phone contradicted the claim of infidelity. 3 weeks after the confession, Eduardo Mireles passed away due to heart complications, taking with him many of the answers that the families and investigators were still seeking. The public prosecutor's office concluded that, regardless of the motivations, there was enough evidence to classify it as a homicide by eventual intent, as Eduardo had deliberately locked the door, knowing the couple would not be able to get out. In 2023, 20 years after the disappearance, the case of Marcelu and Juliana is studied in police academies as an example of the tragic consequences of contaminated crime scenes and the importance of thorough investigations in missing persons cases. The wine cellar, where the bodies were found, was preserved and transformed into a memorial, with restricted access for researchers and criminology students. For Marcelu's family, who had always suspected Eduardo but never had concrete proof, the late confession brought a mix of relief and frustration. We waited 20 years for justice, and in the end, the man who took my brother's life died without paying for his crime, lamented Rodrigo Fernandez, Marcelu's older brother, in a recent interview. The case also triggered changes in missing persons investigation protocols in Brazil. In 2014, the Marcelu and Juliana law was enacted, establishing stricter guidelines for crime scene preservation and mandating the use of technologies like gyrodar and thermal cameras in searches within historical buildings. The story of the couple, who disappeared on the night of their engagement and was found 19 years later, remains a grim reminder of how family secrets and decisions made in moments of despair can lead to irreparable tragedies. It also highlights how the truth, no matter how painful and delayed, eventually finds its way into the light. If you've watched until the end, it's because you care about these cases that mark families forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end, so I can know you and see who truly cares about the search for the truth." Don't forget to like this video and share it with people who are also interested in real investigative cases. Subscribe to the channel to follow more stories that reveal the complexities of human nature and the mysteries that challenge our justice system. The repercussions of the Marcelu and Juliana case extended far beyond the families directly involved, provoking a national reflection on investigative procedures and how missing persons cases are handled in Brazil. In the years following the discovery of the bodies and Eduardo Mireles' confession, various legislative and institutional initiatives were implemented. Using this case as a reference. In 2016, the Pernambuco Institute of Forensic Science opened a laboratory specialized in the analysis of complex crime scenes named after Marcelu and Juliana. The space, equipped with advanced 3D scanning technologies and chemical analysis of time-degraded traces, became a national reference for similar cases. The National Police Academy incorporated a detailed study of this case into the training curriculum for new investigators, emphasizing the critical errors made and how they could have been avoided. Among the highlighted lessons are the importance of meticulous photographic documentation, verification of original architectural plans, and the constant questioning of information provided by property owners, even when they are family members of the victims. On a social level, the case inspired the creation of the Memory and Justice Foundation, a non-profit organization founded by Marcelu's siblings in 2015. The institution assists families of missing persons, providing legal and psychological support, as well as resources for independent investigations. Every year, the foundation organizes the National Meeting for Answers, an event that brings together the families of the missing, forensic experts, and authorities to discuss advances and challenges in the field. Marcia Cavalcanti, Juliana's mother, despite the profound trauma, became an active voice in the fight for justice in similar cases. After divorcing Eduardo in 2012, Immediately after the first suspicions about his involvement, she dedicated herself to studying forensic psychology and published the book When Silence Speaks: Narratives of Families, fragmented by disappearance in 2018, which became a reference in specialized literature. The mansion, which had been closed for years due to legal disputes, was finally transformed into a cultural center in 2021. The space maintains a permanent exhibition on the case, with an educational and respectful approach, focusing on the investigative and scientific advances that the case provoked. The former secondary wine cellar, where the bodies were found, remains sealed and accessible only for scientific purposes with judicial authorization. In 2022, a documentary produced by an international streaming platform revived interest in the case, bringing exclusive interviews with retired investigators who participated in the initial search efforts. In this material, former detective Roberto Almeida revealed that he had always suspected Eduardo Mirel's behavior, but faced political pressure not to pursue this line of investigation due to the family's influence in Recife society. The documentary's impact led to the reopening of other closed cases of mysterious disappearances in historic buildings in Brazil. In Salvador, for example, the case of a tour guide who went missing in 1998 at the Snow Marcelo Fort was solved in 2023 when new searches with radar located his remains in an unmapped subterranean chamber on the 20th anniversary of the disappearance. In July 2023, an ecumenical ceremony brought together the Fernandes and Cavalcanti families, excluding, naturally, Eduardo Mirel's, who had already passed away, at the cemetery where Marcelo and Juliana were finally buried together. The joint gravestone, chosen by both families, bears the inscription, "Time reveals what silence hides. Rest now in truth and peace." For the investigators who dedicated decades to the case, its resolution brought a mix of professional satisfaction and frustration over incomplete justice. Detective Almeida, in his last interview before retiring in 2023, reflected, "This case taught us that, in missing persons investigations, we must always be suspicious of coincidences, question physical structures, and above all, never assume innocence or guilt based on family ties or social position." Perhaps the most significant legacy of the case is the shift in public perception of disappearances. Previously often treated as lower priority matters by the media and authorities, missing persons cases began to receive more consistent attention and a more technical approach following the widespread impact of the Marcelo and Juliana case. Statistics from the Ministry of Justice indicate that between 2015 and 2023, there was a 47% increase in the resolution rate of missing persons cases in Brazil, largely attributed to the new investigative methodologies implemented after this landmark case. For new generations of police officers, forensic experts, and law students, the story of the couple who disappeared on the night of their engagement has become more than just a case study. It has become a symbol of the perseverance needed in the search for the truth and the importance of never abandoning hope for answers, no matter how painful they may be.